In the past, I've made videos describing and shedding light on how being the youngest child can create some very difficult dynamics and very negative belief systems, and how the stereotypes that are pressed on us actually have a very negative effect on our outlook of life, and they actually shape us in many ways. But in each one of those videos talking about the past pain and the things that I've went through, I usually tried to say something along the lines of, I wouldn't change anything. There are 6 children in this family. The first 4 came in rapid succession, with a bit more of a gap between the last 2. 2 girls and then 4 boys, with 6 years between me and my next older brother. My oldest sister moved 11 hours away before I was 10, and my next sister followed soon after. And that's right over the time when my brothers and my dad were investing in our family by building a business from scratch and contributing to the family unit by creating that safe environment. And it felt like we kind of missed each other or lost each other in the swirling fabric of life in our different endeavors and ventures that we were a part of. And I've done a lot of reflecting over this area of my life and just how this has affected my life and changed me. And it's really easy to talk about all of the things that, were stacked against us, or how we missed certain things in life because of where we were placed in the family. Not because of anyone's fault, it's just the way life worked, like not really knowing your sisters before they leave the house, that's kind of a bummer. And if you go back and read through the comments of my first video, they're like, man, some of them are just gut-wrenching. Like the responses that I've gotten, there's a lot of pain that youngest children have in some areas of their life. But that's when I remembered something. You see, a while ago, I sent out an anonymous survey for youngest children to fill out so that they could share some of their experiences in life and some of the things that they had experienced in their family dynamics and how it had affected them. And one of the questions that I asked on that survey, which you can take if you like, it's still active and available. One of the questions that I asked though was, if you could change or delete anything from your past, what would it be? And that question is just loaded with potential, right? Because we all can think of things that we wish were different, or we wish we had changed, or we wish hadn't happened to us. And that's a lot of the responses that I've gotten from the people that have taken this survey. They say, I wish my relationships with my parents had been different. I wish this memory wouldn't have been there, or I wish I hadn't experienced this trauma. I wish my trust had not been broken. But one response stood out above all the others, and it's totally anonymous. I don't know who it was or their age or anything. And they just said, I had a really difficult childhood, but I wouldn't change a single thing about it. And they said, because if I did, I would not be who I am today. And that's when I realized that as the youngest child, and because of these dynamics and these differences and all of that fun stuff that we talk about in other videos, because of this, it has enhanced some of my abilities. It's shrunk other of my abilities, and it's fun to talk about those sometimes, but I think it's time to look at this and say, what have we gained? What are abilities that we have that are strengths because of where we were placed in the family? We have those, and if we can learn to recognize those, we can lean into those strengths, and our families can learn to lean into those strengths and call us to those strengths, which is really, really powerful. And so as I talk about these things that are purely my own subjective, opinions, I'm not saying they're universal. I'm just saying I've experienced these and I want to share them. You may recognize these in yourself as the youngest, or in a younger sibling or something like that you relate to. And you may begin to notice these strengths in them, which is really, really cool. It's really fun to notice these things. I grew up really, really fast. There's only about 5 people that I've met in my life where I met them and I knew them for an extended period of time, and I still guessed their age wrong by like 5 years. It's kind of embarrassing, especially when you've known them for a long period of time. But what's interesting about that is the handful that I have met, most of them are either the youngest in their family or close to the youngest. They're closer to being the youngest than others. And I've seen this in myself quite a bit. From a very young age, I've had a very grown-up mindset. It's kind of weird. Obviously, I don't know what it would be like to not have it this way, so it's a little hard to gauge that, I guess. But like, for example, I remember being like 8 and looking at other children my age and just being like so confused with what they were doing. I just remember thinking like, man, that child is so immature. Like, why would he do that? Things that that child shouldn't have recognized or not been doing until they were like, 13 or 14. And I'm like looking at it and just like baffled. Like, why would you say that? Like, obviously that's gonna be misunderstood. I just remember being so confused by children that were my age. Because if you think about it, we tend to mold to fit the environment that we're in. I'll give you an example. A father is usually very, very talented at seeing the world through his children's eyes and knowing how to communicate to them in a way on their level so that they will be able to grasp and understand what he is saying to them. And in a similar way, I grew up surrounded by a family of adults. And so I learned to see the world through their eyes. I learned to think the way that they thought and to process emotion and life in the way that they did because they were older than me and I saw how they did it. And so I kind of skipped over some steps, it seemed like. And this meant that I started noticing things at a much earlier age. For example, like business opportunities or communication styles or emotions. Problem solving, that was a huge one for me. I just picked up these things and like learned them at a much younger age. And obviously this isn't in all areas of my life, thankfully I'm still a kid in some ways, but I've noticed it and it's really interesting and it can be a double-edged sword. Now, before I go on to the second enhanced ability, I do need to make a disclaimer. There's so many things that I'm leaving out and I'm touching a small portion here, and I just need you to know that this is not obviously universal. This is not completely objective. This is my own experience and my own opinions. And I'm just kind of tossing it out there to see if it resonates with other people. And the main thing I want to make clear is that these things that I'm discussing, these enhanced abilities, these are mostly internal, like their mindsets, their strengths, their, disciplines, they're things like that. If I were to talk about all the external ways that my family and the place in my family has affected me, and the stability that brought, like not having to worry about, like starving, like, that was a thing for my older brothers. And I never experienced that. So like if I were to talk about all of those things, I'd be here for hours. Like there are literally so many things and I don't want to discount that and I don't want to just avoid that and be like, oh, that's not important. That didn't affect me. It created a very safe environment for me to experience these things that I'm now talking about. And it's not something we should take for granted. But I just want to clarify that this video is mostly focusing on the internal results of that environment that they built. Perspective. Because the lastborn is born onto a ship that pretty much already knows how to sail,
Windward, brace and sheet! Hold the pennant line! What are you doing?
They end up kind of flexing and molding to fit whatever role is not yet filled by the family unit. So they may be the comedian or the mediator or the deep processor, but because they are so good at conforming and fitting the need that needs to be met by the family, they're often incredibly intuitive and very perceptive because they've learned how to read family situations and group situations in a much different way than most people do. And then when you combine that with reading a book on how to read body language, you can imagine how that compounds the effect. So if you're curious about that and you want to learn more about it, video will be linked up here. Fascinating stuff. And I know very extroverted youngest children who are the life of the party. They're right there in the mix, just going for it. And then I also know other youngest children who are kind of like myself, where we would hang back a little bit. We'd be on the fringes and we would just observe. One learns how to read a situation by experiencing it, and the other one learns how to read it by perceiving it and being detached from it and seeing the big picture, seeing what's happening as a whole. And this really enhanced my ability to feel tension in groups and in situations, and to be able to read that and pick up on it and then know how to approach it. Especially like one-on-one, I really see that in that area. And I can honestly say that's one of the skills that I value very highly in my toolkit. But by far the biggest thing I would never change is my creativity. I've been obsessed with creativity and sharing the results of my creativity ever since I was a very small child. Kind of embarrassing to go back and watch those videos, honestly. And it was kind of a natural result of being the youngest of 6 children. And especially with the age gap of 6 years between me and my next sibling, I was oftentimes just playing by myself. I would spend hours and hours and hours building a elaborate world in my mind because I didn't have like a phone to do the work for me. You know, I had to actually do the work myself to have fun and be creative. And that's why I'm here now, hundreds of videos and thousands of hours later, and that creativity has given me an outlet to speak into other people's lives. And that's an area that I've been incredibly thankful and very blessed with, that I would never ever change. And this kind of goes back to something else I've been thinking about, is the power of reframing something. So like taking it and like focusing, like changing what you focus on, because what you focus on, you will feel. So, you know, I could look at all of these and see the negative aspect of it, of like, you know, oh, I felt invisible with my family. Or I could look at the side where I learned how to read a group situation really, really well and know what people are thinking and feeling from like across the room. I mean, that's kind of cool. So like you can reframe that, or like, you know, oh, I didn't have a lot of people my age growing up, so I spent most of my childhood by myself. Or I could focus on, this allows me to reach like thousands of people and potentially someday millions of people, because that forced me to be creative and use that creativity. Like, you know, there's reframing that can happen, and we can choose to focus on the good or the bad. And the one empowers us, and the other one holds us in the past, and we don't live in the past. You know what I mean? Like focusing on the past doesn't really help you unless you live there. We learn what we can from it, and we apply it to the future, and we move on. So I'm curious if you resonated with any of these things that I shared, whether you're the youngest child or not. Like, if so, what was it? Which one did you resonate with? If not, why not? You know, what strengths or enhanced abilities have you found in yourself or noticed, youngest child or not, just based on your family dynamics? Or maybe you're more interested in understanding how I enhanced my enhanced ability to read body language. Wow, that's a mouthful. If that's the case, check out the video in the dead center of the screen right here. You can't miss it. Seriously, it's like right on top of my head.